Which I find very unique and fascinating about your career too, is that you got to sit in on the UAP/UFO congressional hearings, both I believe this past year and in 2023 for David Grusch and Lue Elizondo's speaking. How was the whole climate of that whole day, beforehand, during, and after? What were the emotions like? Can you just take us through that whole experience?
So these were two hearings. The first one was epic. I mean, you, there's often a crowd here in Washington D.C. and especially oversight. There's usually some interest, but this was of a level no one has ever seen. You had people lined all throughout the building in a line to try to get into that hearing, and they were so. When you talk to those people, they were so excited just to get that Congress was looking into this, right? And I now for me, I'm a skeptic. I think it's foolish to just jump to a conclusion that these are little green men from another planet that travels here. I think that I say, I'm from Missouri. You're gonna have to show me, right? Like until I see it, I'm not gonna believe it. But I will say, we have a responsibility. When we had testimony from fighter pilots who have said that their lives are at risk because they are encountering these UAPs, and sometimes there's near collisions with them that are reported. It is very disturbing, the level of activity, especially near our military bases and nuclear facilities. So it certainly is a security risk. But the biggest concern is that we know that there are programs that are operating in the dark and they're not following the law. They're not reporting to Congress what their activities are. And so we need to remedy that. That's the purpose of oversight, is to make sure. I think we have a responsibility to root out where agencies are trying to avoid Congress.
Yeah, because given the subject of UAPs and among others, and it appears that in fact the government is outside the control of either the democratic or judicial processes. Does this sort of match your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was one thing when David Grusch, testified in the hearing, and he talked about how these special access programs are, the overall program is compartmentalizing this topic into these many individual special access programs across the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, and intelligence. And so that way, none of these particular special access programs know the overall, what's happening overall. That was, and that level of secrecy, and what was confirmed by the Office of Inspector General when they investigated Grush's claims that they're not being transparent. They were able to confirm, that Grusch is right, that these agencies are not being fully transparent, and they are over compartmentalizing.
And
they weren't going to confirm the other things that Grusch said, that these are aliens from another planet, but that's not for them to do.
Sure. And given that this whole phenomenon seems to be global, are there any type of plans to collaborate with any international governments or organizations to address these issues more comprehensively?
I don't think so, and I don't think that will ever happen, because I think that if it truly is some kind of technology that is off-world, then there's a race to basically, to be able to get that technology, to reverse engineer that technology, if that's the case. So there's no way that they're going to work together with other nations on that. But one of the things I found really interesting is that the ARROW, which is the agency that's currently studying the UAP phenomenon, what they said to us is that the topic of aliens from another planet, or these UFOs, is not top secret. It's actually not a secret. It is. What I mean is that it's not a classified topic. It's not something that the federal government even has the ability to keep secret, because at the end of the day, the government is to protect government secrets, not information about something that's outside of the federal government. But a lot of times, where the rubber meets the road is that you have footage or photos that have captured these objects, and the technology behind what has captured them through video or photos is top secret. And so because of that, that makes it extremely difficult to get access to view what information that we do have.
Mm, and
Does that make sense?
yes, yeah. And how was the comparison from the Grush environment to the hearing with Lue Elizondo?
Yeah, with Lou, that hearing, I don't know that there was a lot said that was different. If anything, it's underscoring what was said in the previous hearing. And as someone who is a skeptic, one has to wonder, how many, you know, we continue to have people from the deep state, from the military industrial complex come forward and blow a whistle. At some point, it continues to lend credibility to the previous testimony.
Mm, and
And there's a spiritual aspect of this as well. I don't know if you have,
yes, there is, because he said even that he theorizes that these things come from a higher dimension, I believe is what he said.
yeah, David Grusch was the line of questioning that I tried to go down with him, is that in his briefing, what he sent to us, he had discussed that one of the ongoing theories, or one of the dominant theories, is that these aliens are extradimensional. In other words, they have the ability to exist outside of the normal dimensions that we live in. And my response to that is, okay, well then to me that sounds like angels. That sounds like angelic beings. And so I think that, and so there's an entire community of Christians who believe that, and I don't think it's inconsistent with the Bible. I mean, they basically just say, I mean, clearly God describes other creatures when he's describing, seraphim and cherubim, and, what we classically call angels, that these are clearly different races that we don't normally recognize on planet Earth, right? And so the question is, do the cherubim and seraphim, are they like aliens from another planet? Do they have their own, place where they reside and they come from? And do they have the ability to travel here? And if so, it might explain, what some of the encounters in the Bible, where you have things that are clearly terrifying to see, because every time an angel is described as seeing someone, they have to first say, "Don't be afraid," right? So I don't, I've that is an interesting conversation, and as a Christian, it's fun to explore that conversation, but I still come back to the fact that at the end of the day, I cannot. I'm not going to jump to a conclusion and believe that these are little green men, or something from another planet, until I actually get my hands on something or see something.
Sure, because on the flip side of that too, there is a sort of darkness as well involved with the UAP phenomenon that seems to be even more harmful. And I know many Christians theorize that there is some kind of demonic uh, part of it too, as well as the angelic part of it as well. Which makes me think, for you and your colleagues, were there, I guess, challenges with opposition between what you guys were thinking amongst your colleagues when it came to the hearings, like the post results of them?
No, I think generally there's everyone has a very inquisitive attitude. Now, some people they're absolutely sold that these are aliens from another planet. I think they can't come into this conversation believing that. And I don't want to, I personally don't want to do that. I don't want to presuppose. I want to actually have a thoughtful dialogue and investigate and try to get down to real truth, because it could very well. And this is what I said in the hearing: is that isn't it more likely, as opposed to when people talk about the odds, and I'll concede, like, the universe is vast, it's huge, and if you give, the argument when people say, surely somewhere out in this vast universe there's other life on other planets. I'm not going to argue with that, but what I will say is it also means that given the vastness of the universe, of all the places that another life on another planet is going to go, why in the world would they come here? Right? The 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 same argument holds. If the universe is that vast, that means that the likelihood is very, very unlikely that of all places that they would travel exactly here. If that does that make sense? And so that's why I said, Occam's razor, which is basically the most obvious conclusion, is that is that what we're seeing is either our top secret military planes, and I've been in skiff meetings with Arrow and others who have shown us some of the famous footage and photos that people talk about as being UFOs, and then they will identify them as some of our military, some of the U.S. military's assets. And then there's also times where it's just people take photos and they end up being balloons, right? Or just or like an appearance of something that can be explained. But I think the most likely scenario is that we either what people are seeing is either U.S. military advanced avionics, or experimental aviation that is done by our private businesses. Like, you've got Lockheed Martin, you have Boeing, you've got Raytheon. There's a lot of companies that are in that space. And if you think about it, if Raytheon, for example, is working on a particular project, then Lockheed Martin isn't going to know about what Raytheon is working on, because that's by design. They want to keep their trade secrets. And so I think that dynamic can create the opportunity for there to be confusion about what is actually flying around.